Okay, we are on. Now today's topic, I will focus in on the laptop. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Fung.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome again to our Christian Holistic series. As you've seen, today's topic is titled The Two-Stage Healing Approach for the Alcohol and the Drug Addict. In my opinion, the alcohol or drug addicted patient is a severely wounded spiritual, physical, psychosocial human being. This could happen to anyone. Is there anyone among you who is perfect and without sin? However, some are more successful or more susceptible than others. The big question is why? My goal this evening is to offer a two-stage approach. To help, stage one involves to help my patient rediscover their true authentic identity of who are you. This, for me, I believe is most critical in any condition where you are struggling or suffering. And two, to heal the wounds of the past that has disrupted your journey of life with loss of your authentic identity. And three, to discover your unique God-given gift and talent. As I said before, I believe each of us carries a very unique God-given gift and talent. Stage two, and only then are you ready to undergo withdrawal therapy for your addiction with medical, psychological, and social support measures. My definition of an addict is one who carries a deeply wounded spirit with loss of their authentic identity. Who are you? But possesses a unique God-given gift and talent. Do you know your God-given gift and talent? But desperately craving for affirming love, that's searching for inner peace, happiness, and a deeper meaning to life. But caught in the web of drug and or alcohol addiction that leads to chronic social illnesses and suicide. Lack or loss of affirming love, that is love for who you are, by rejection, betrayal, and abandonment of affirming love by the ones closest to you, which would normally be your family, your parents, your spouse, and or by yourself. Many of us have rejected ourselves, unable to accept ourselves for who we are. I consider this the prime missing link to any form of addiction. Later on, I would explain what I mean by this. It's called love deception. Is your love conditional? That is, love for what I am or what you are? Or is your love unconditional? That is, love for who I am or who you are? To experience unconditional love is to know that you are loved just for being you, with your unique gifts and talents. There is nothing to prove, and there is nothing to gain. It's just being who you are. And this starts in your family customs, family lifestyles. And the struggle we face in family quite many times is that we are more or less encouraged to be the good boy or the good girl, which means that we just have to do everything as our parents require us to do. And we learn that if we obey and we do what is right, we are good. There's no room for mistakes. So if you make a mistake, the suggestion would be you're a bad boy or you're a bad girl. And although we know parents don't really mean that, and it's their way of trying to discipline us, but unfortunately, it has an adverse effect. The same applies for school and in social events. It's not uncommon to see the ones who get rewarded are the ones who succeed, and the ones who are beautiful, and the one who dresses the best, or the one who gets the highest marks. But you don't have to have the best marks, or you don't have to have the nicest clothes to be loved for who you are. It's the same thing with government rules and regulations and laws, where they impose laws that sometimes is difficult for many of the citizens to maintain and upkeep. And the way how you are corrected is by punishment, whether it's just to be, although you have to have rule and order, but many times the emphasis is put so much on trying to correct people, to change them, to conform to what is considered the law. Many people rebel, or they come to believe they are failures in life. And the way how society affirms people and the lifestyle trends that we see develop causes people to feel if you are not like them, then you don't belong. I believe all of these things makes life and love very conditional. And instead of trying to be the best you can be and learn from that, we are sort of promoted to become what others believe you have to be in order to be a somebody, in order to be loved. The reality is, many of us never measure up to that standard. But by putting myself before others, where it's a question of me first and what I want, as opposed to what is best for us, and to escape the stresses of life as we struggle in life, or the peer pressure to belong, to be accepted in a certain way. Many of times out of that deep stressful frustration and unhappiness, we end up seeking a happy trip, seeking something that will help me to escape. That becomes my number one priority. And unfortunately, many of us discover that with the use of alcohol and drugs. Why? Because these drugs and alcohol does initially gives us a good feeling, a feeling of good, an escape from the pressures and worries of life. In other words, an escape from my reality, and makes me feel I'm free. It is never my intention to become an addict. It is just an escape, I hope, that will give me a breather in life. Unfortunately, these drugs and alcohol become habit forming, and before you know it, you're hooked on it. You need it to survive. Today, in 2018, we are faced with epidemic proportions of alcohol and drug addictions. This is worldwide, not only in Canada. And in spite of all the medical, psychological, and social treatments, we are still remain in this epidemic dilemma. As a result of that, we are faced with family and social relationship problems, and ultimately we are faced with health, housing, and financial problems. We are unable to help ourselves. Now, stage one in the approach that I'm offering, stage one is to recognize my need for help. That is not always easy because it's hard to fight an addiction. However, the self-perception chart that does an assessment of you, I believe, opens us up towards recovery, because it uncovers the deepest root cause of my addiction. Do you know why you are addicted? And healing that root cause of my addiction becomes the objective. The self-perception chart, when applied, that helps you to look at, to review yourself from a physical, intellectual, emotional, sexual, spiritual, relational, and a coping ability point of view. Is an attempt to identify my wounded, fragmented spirit, which, in my opinion, is the deepest root of one's addiction and dysfunctional behavior, because when you lose your identity of who you are, and you lose the ability to rationalize and to think properly or to function, you are unable to help yourself. And my goal in the first stage is the healing of your wounded, fragmented spirit. Until your spirit is healed, just receiving medical, physical, psychosocial treatment is like putting a band-aid on your problem. The self-discovery from doing the self-perception chart assists me in discovering the deepest wound of the past where this problem started. And the spiritual stress arising out of the rejection, betrayal, and abandonment of love that causes physical, psychosocial illnesses needs to be addressed. As the self-perception chart assists me to identify my feelings from that wounded part of me, my thoughts from that wounded part of me, and my actions from that wounded part of me, displays my dysfunctional behavior and my dysfunctional way of thinking, and paralyzed with my negative feelings. These feelings, thoughts, and actions in turn affect my personality and my behavior as expressed in my physique, expressed in my intellect, expressed in my emotions, in my sexuality, my spirituality, my relationships, and my coping ability. One can see from this all the different dysfunctional problems we read in the news every day, of the things that people do that sometimes blows your mind. And why would people who are normally good end up doing such awful things, such abusive things, and for some reason, it's not like it's their prime intention, but they lose control of who they are. They still have to be responsible for their actions, but I'm just arresting people, putting them in jail, fining them, disqualifying them. Yes, that serves a purpose, but it never cures the underlying root problem, which I believe originates in your wounded, broken spirit. The reality is you cannot change the past, because many times what the self-perception chart reveals is from trauma that we experience from the past. Many times childhood trauma. And so who can change the past? I believe not even God could change the past. So how does one grow from the past that has caused us so much pain? For me, as a Christian, I believe Jesus Christ, my Lord and my Savior, can heal the wounds of the past, where He taught us to pray, to seek forgiveness, where He taught us to forgive, where he taught us to confess and then pray for the grace and move on. Acknowledge your faults. I would just like to say a little prayer here that I believe most people know. It's called the Lord's Prayer. So it goes this way. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from all evil. Amen. As I said, you cannot change the past, but I believe with the grace of God, we can move on. So change my heart, O God. Make it ever new. Change my heart, O God. May I be like you. You are the potter. I am the clay. Melt me and mold me. This is what I pray. Does the addict need help? Help to kick the habit? Help to find a safe place? Help to discover his authentic self? Help to experience the affirming love of who I am? Help to discover my God-given gift and talent? Help to move on with my life? Help to be set free by seeking my God of mercy for his healing love and direction. In my opinion, we need all these factors, but we could only do one at a time. And that is where we will start. It is your choice. And as we move on with dealing with the help that we feel we need, the drugs and the alcohol has affected my physical, emotional, mental, and social health. This is where I believe phase 2 of the treatment comes in. We may need medical assistance. We may need psychological assistance. We may need social assistance. And, as I said, spiritual assistance. So it means that as we seek to heal the brokenness in our spirit, to help us to reclaim our authentic identity of who I am, and to seek God's mercy and guidance, we also need medical, psychological, social, and spiritual assistance. I would like to share 2 cases to emphasize these points. The first case involves a woman, 66, addicted to tranquilizers. This is when she first appeared in my office. She was trembling. She looked very anxious. I never saw her before. But she came to ask if I could give her a prescription for her tranquilizers because her doctor, her regular doctor, was not available. Just looking at her, I couldn't help but feel that she was dependent, addicted to this medication. So I asked her outright, "Are you dependent, addicted to these pills?" I asked. And her answer was no. But you could see from the expression on her face that she was not speaking the truth. So I said to her, "I would like to help you, but giving you a prescription for these pills, I do not believe will help you. It will just make you worse." She looked at me and she started to cry. So I comforted her, and then she began to tell me her story. And in her story, as a young girl, she was very beautiful. She was a model, and she was used in many advertisements that you might see on the news, in books, or even on television. But then, what happened? Suddenly, people in her life, including her husband, her sister, and other close friends, they all died in a very short space of time. And although it's no fault of her own, in her thinking, she felt God was punishing her. Why? I guess she carried a lot of guilt in her for her to think that way. But anyhow, because of that, she stopped practicing her faith. She was Catholic. And even when her son, her only son, got married and her first grandchild, she refused to see the grandchild, far less touch him, because she believed that everything that she touched, God took it away from her. Right. So with that, I said to her, "How can I help you?" And she had no answer specifically for that. But I said to her, "Would you like to pray?" And she allowed me to pray with her. And I suggested to her, in the local church, there was a prayer meeting every Wednesday, and if she wished, I could take her to that meeting. When we went, it was part of the renewal in the church. The next question she asked me was this Catholic? Because she never saw people giving praise to God, putting their hands up and singing out as they were. And I said, yes, it was the charismatic renewal. One evening, we were celebrating the Holy Eucharist. So at the time of receiving communion, I asked her if she would like to receive communion, to come up. So she went up. After receiving the Eucharist, she turned to me and she said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." So I was shocked by what she said, because I did not feel I did anything wrong. I invited her, and she had a choice to decide whether she wanted to go or not. But from that, what I discovered, after her husband died, she had planned to move in with her sister, who lived in a condominium. And she was to move in 1 week later. When she went to move in to the sister's place, to her horror, she found her sister was dead in the apartment and probably died in the bathroom for several days. She was shocked. At the mass, the funeral mass for the sister, when she went up to receive the Eucharist, she just started to tremble and her hands were clenched. She could not open her hands or her mouth to receive the Eucharist. And that was several years ago. So when she received the Eucharist this time, this was the first time she received the Eucharist after several years. But after she told me that story, and I said, I'm sorry if I caused you any pain, after that, she just became totally free. She started smiling, and she realized that fear that paralyzed her and that way of thinking had sort of imprisoned her for all these years. After that, her change became remarkable to the point that her son and family lived in British Columbia, and she wanted to go and visit them and overcome that fear of everything she touched would die. I would like to say, through the grace of God, one day I received a gift of flowers delivered to my home, and on it was a card, and it said, "You would know who this is." And I knew it was her. She had gone to British Columbia. She saw her grandson for the first time, and she relocated there. So this to me is an example of how God's merciful love can heal the brokenness within us, and how many times our understanding and thinking of how things happen can become distorted when we carry all the pain and the hurt inside of us. The second case is a chap who is a recovering alcoholic. He came from a very abusive alcoholic family, primarily his father. A family where he is the younger of 2 boys. A family where he has experienced a lot of violence. And a family where he saw his mother abused physically, emotionally, mentally by his father. A family where they have experienced tragedies in their family life, of shootings and things like that. To the point where the elder brother could not take it anymore and he ran away from home. He wanted to run away too, but he felt he had to stay there for his mother's sake. Anyhow, with all of this, he became an alcoholic. And he was the type of alcoholic that when he was intoxicated, he was like a bull in a china shop. And when he was sober, as they would say, he would give the shirt off his back. He would hurt anybody. It's like two different types of people. Anyhow, in his journey, because his wife never left him and she continually prayed for him, he eventually gave up his alcohol and turned towards God and tried his best to overcome his problems. The reason I'm seeing him, in spite of all of this, is because he still remained depressed in spite of it. So here's a case now where he's been healed of his alcoholism, but still depressed. And although he feels relieved that he's, as we said, returned to the church, he's still depressed. Until one day I said to him, I don't think there's anything more I can do to help you. You seem to be doing everything correctly. And then he said to me, Doc, there's one thing I would like to share with you. And he said this memory just came back to him. And the memory was that as a 8 or 9-year-old boy, he was an altar boy. And on this day, the priest was conducting a funeral service. And he was the altar boy in the middle of the week. So he was missing his class. And at the time, when the priest went to incense the coffin with the deceased in it, he suddenly realized that he, the undertaker, and the priest were the only people present in the church. There were no family, no relatives, no friends. It was completely empty. And it just struck him that this is not right, that nobody in this world should die and leave this world with none of their loved ones there to bid them farewell. So he started to cry, and apparently he cried quite loudly. The priest asked him what was wrong, and he shared the story to the priest. The priest in turn scolded him and said, we cannot have you here if you're going to disrupt the service. I guess it reminded him of his father. And he just kept it in that resentment, kept in that hurt. And what struck me about him was, why would a 9-year-old boy be so upset over